Awesome.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Now, Next, Later. I'm excited to jump right into the content, but before I do, Sasha, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's been a minute. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. It has. It's good to be back on. Last week we were live with Mark McCardle from CFPB. So CFPB doesn't let you post recordings; it's live only. So that was
Understood.
so we're 2 weeks since our last episode, technically.
You were live with them while I was live with them, just in
That's
different settings.
true. You were in person in DC. I was virtual live with
Yeah,
Mark. It's so funny. That's right.
yeah.
And today we're joined by Ethan Winchell from Truework, the founder. So, Ethan, welcome to Now Next Later. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Waiting for the dog to come back, Sasha.
Yeah, we were
We might
checking
have
out
another
Sasha's.
cameo.
We may need one. And Ethan, Truework sponsored today's episode so that we could get into the conversation. And one of the fun things that we kind of teed up in our preparation was we want to hear from you. We want to hear these challenges that you're tackling. We also have a lot of lenders and product development, innovation type folks in our audience. So we also want to hear from you on what you see, tech adoption, tech strategies, how you've approached some of these longstanding challenges, what lenders don't know, what lenders should know. So thanks again for being here to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to get into it. Share some of our perspective, how we're helping lenders at Truework. We got Ryan coming on in a couple of weeks to talk about our really grand ambitions and where we'll be kind of in the next 20, 50 years.
Well, good. What we'll do then is we'll create kind of a cliffhanger in the later section to get to him as the bridge to later.
Did I just hear 20 to 50 years? Because I feel like most people in mortgage can't even think 5 years, let alone 10. Like 20 to 50. Wow. That's impressive.
That's the secret. That's the secret. When we started the business, we said we have this crazy, huge 10-year vision. And then we're almost 10 years into it, about 7, 8 years into it. And I think we've said, okay, said 10 years. I think it might be 50, but, our kids will be running the business at that point.
There you go.
That's a good frame up. I think also a good goal.
Yeah.
In the light of that, tell us, you just mentioned how long this has already been. Just give our audience just a brief, where are you now with Truework and what it is that you offer, and then we'll jump into some of those other things we talked about.
Yeah, so I'd say what we offer is a way to reduce your total costs on verification of income and employment by 50%. And the way we do that is with our Truework income platform, which is able to demonstrate a 75% completion rate. And I'll kind of explain what some of those words mean. When we say total cost, we mean the cost of verifying income and employment. So this is labor cost and data cost. So it's factoring in places where, you are not getting complete or usable data from a verification of income or employment vendor. So your humans are left processing things, or you're not getting a hit. So you got to take a doc or call an employer all in. And this can be loan officer time that's spent away serving, clients, helping them get them into the right product. Instead, they're just dealing with paperwork. It can also be, data costs that overrun tremendously. We see, a lot of examples of folks paying for a ton of data that never gets into the closed loan file. And so, we built this product to solve that issue. Production costs have skyrocketed. That's no surprise, or, that's not controversial to say for anyone on the call. And we found a way to reduce the costs related to VOIE in half. And that's like the challenge. And we'll continue to improve both of those numbers, both improve our completion rate and that will lead to overall cost reductions.
No, I think that's, it's nice to hear you say. I remember when I was at Rocket Mortgage, I think one of the hardest things to quantify and put data analytics around for leadership is the human toll that you just described. This industry for decades has been able to sort of overlook that like human grind, I think. And now in the last few years, it's been impossible to overlook because of the costs and because of the speed and a lot of those other challenges. And you have, like you said, loan officers doing a task or doing work, submitting it for somebody else to make sure that work was done right and double check it to then send it through to maybe do it even a third time. And so that human friction is real and hard to quantify.
Yeah. A couple things there. Yeah. To your point, hard to quantify. No one's really like, when we sit down in our like sales engagement, in particular with like the really large lenders that we serve. We actually have a program where we start to break these costs down for them. And when you put it all on paper, we're going line by line with the CFO or the COO that's going, what about how much do you pay your underwriters? How much do you pay your loan officers? How many documents are they dealing with? How long do they spend? And so you go line by line and validate each and every assumption. And you get into the millions of dollars of labor that's being spent in like a very inefficient way. But one of the biggest obstacles, to your point, is then going and actually executing on the change management piece. And I feel like that's the piece that will continue to be a struggle, where like you buy vendors to go and do a job for you, but for whatever reason you're unable to put the pressure that you need to put on the vendors to deliver the outcome and remove the people from the process. So then you're just actually left with like stacked costs that like end up, okay, I pay a vendor to do a job, but I don't actually trust them to do the job, so I'm going to have people like kind of spot check their work, and then you just end up paying twice as much for the same job. So, and to the point about production, like the biggest expense in your production cost is still the people. So I don't know, I'm encouraged that right now, just given like where volumes are relative to historical volumes, like, right, like there will probably not be fewer people. So we actually are fortunate we're not talking about a situation where you need to go buy technology and fire a bunch of people. We're at a point where you need to have technology in place so that, and then instead of going and rehiring people that you've already bought a technology to do, just don't go hire those people. Look at your vendors, look what you have bought them to do. And whether it's, changing like production targets, maybe your loan processor should be able to handle 60 instead of 30 because you bought all these tools to make them more efficient. And if you can't trust your tools to allow your production teams to be more efficient, go and don't renew those tools, because they're obviously not doing like a critical job for you. So like, it's actually either fine to do either, to say, I'm going to grunt it out with people, or I'm going to buy technology to automate. I think people get into this issue when they're like, they kind of try to do both. They kind of take a half measure in each camp.
Yeah, Sasha, that's a theme that we haven't heard. One of the things that does come up, Ethan, all the time is adoption and how you get adoption in this industry. One of the things that you said, which was just pretty hopeful, I would say, for lenders, is even if you feel like you've made mistakes in the past overpaying with that redundancy and you haven't addressed it, you don't have to let that get you down right now. Right now, you can look at your tools and don't staff up as much at a minimum. Yeah. And that's something, Sasha, I think we've been looking for those kind of practical tips. That seems like one of them to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of lenders are hesitant and shy to rehire at this stage, even with a little bit of pickup in the market. We know seasonality is going to hit. And so I think some people are a little bit more like, okay, things are getting better, but maybe just not quite yet. But even when things really turn around and we get into a full upcycle again, it is better to be smarter, in how we work, not harder. And I do think that there is a place for technology to enable and empower the human factor. And it's a matter of getting your process cleaned up, getting your data cleaned up, finding the right partners. And then once you put that technology in place, figuring out where does it make sense with the people I already have. And then if I still have people gaps, now I can go out and be more strategic in how I hire, where I might have thought that I needed a general processor. Now I'm realizing, no, I just need a specialist to run a construction desk for me, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think now is the time, and I know people struggle. I can't remember who wrote this post recently, but somebody wrote something about, when we're in down cycles, lenders are hesitant to invest in technology, but it's the right time to do that if you can afford it. And I think it will make a significant difference in how people hire strategically when we start to come back more fully from this market shift.
Yeah, it's really like a great emotional proof of like any sort of technology that you've bought. Like now, when you're faced with a rehiring decision, are you going to just trust the tool that you bought to do it more efficiently, do the job, or do you still feel this thing in your gut that's like, no, I probably still need to hire someone to go and do that? That's a great bellwether for like, should you keep using that tool or not? If you can't trust it to do the job and instead you're just going to hire, go do that and keep running your process with people. There's still a ton of incredible people in this process that deliver, like, to your point, Jeremy, right? Like every incremental mortgage requires some levels of heroics from a person at some point in the process. And if that's what you're going to go with, just go with it and throw the technology out the window.
Yeah, just own it. Right.
I thought I was going to say when I came on.
Yeah, no, but that's right. I mean, it sounds like too, everybody who's trying to introduce a new idea or a new way of doing business to lenders that we talk to, and you're acknowledging is there's obstacles. There's these big obstacles that you've got to overcome, again, to adoption and to really proving worth. It sounds like you've gone at CFOs and said, hey, look, we can show you, we can help you. Let's go at that obstacle. It also sounds like the trust your vendor, trust the technology on more of that operational side. Is there anything else you would point to that says, hey, we identified this obstacle and we went at that one as well with lenders? What are you hearing from lenders on those obstacles beyond the ones we just mentioned?
Well, yeah, I think this comes down to like what I'd call like generally like capabilities. In order to like make the spreadsheet come alive, your product has to have some core capabilities, and that's where we've probably spent the most money just in terms of like R&D costs, like building out the product and the capabilities there. And it's, you know, capabilities that make sure that anytime we're connecting to any sort of data source to furnish a report back to the lender, like we're doing really rigorous QA and QC on that before it gets to the lender. So we know when it's incomplete and they're not paying for it if it's incomplete. And it's not, you know, going from a loan officer assistant to an underwriter only for the underwriter to come back to the loan officer assistant and say, hey, like, you know, this thing wasn't what I needed. And now you've stacked both human costs and you bought a report that didn't end up getting used. So you need to go buy another report. So it's those types of things. It's making it more like organic, like you want to like lessen the change management that is required, and you can like get this kind of automation both in terms of like, you know, loan origination systems, point of sale systems, tapping into like kind of core technology offerings to make it easier to interface with for sure as well.
I think the other side of it is you have to come back again to the human factor, right? Humans don't like change. And in mortgage, we just tend to not like change more. I don't know why, but for some reason, this industry, more so than any other I've ever worked in, really doesn't like change. And so there's a psychology piece, right? And that psyche, that mindset that has to shift around. Humans will always choose a painful thing that they are comfortable with, that they know, over a new change that might be easier and better for them, because we're creatures of habit. And so getting, you know, what I have found in my past roles where I've been critical in implementation success is find your top producers and the ones that will say, yes, I'm in. Find your strategic leaders like your CFOs, your COOs, your head of sales that will say, hey, I'm going to be a champion and advocate. And you kind of work grassroots and top down at the same time. And you get enough under your belt. And then you can start to see people go, okay, I've watched my top producers and my leaders trust this solution. I've seen it verified. It's working. I'm now more comfortable to put my toe in the water than I was before.
Yep. Spot on. Nothing, no notes. Perfect answer.
It's only because I've been through the pain that you've been through many times.
I mean, yeah, it's about like habit formation, and we're forming new habits, and like you can make it really simple for people to adopt new habits, but to your point, like that doesn't always clear the hurdle rate for them to go and adopt new habits. And I think what you're talking to is like, how do you make them feel like motivated? And, you know, we see some of our customers like with super strong cultures that'll just be like, you know, whether it's a loan officer, right? A loan officer is going to get comped when they close the loan, whether or not like they saved money in the production process closing that. But you have some originators that have super strong cultures. And so just like, you know, guys and girls, like our business model is going to be stronger if we execute on this change management. That creates motivation and buy-in, and some, and then others are, you know, more decentralized, and it doesn't create that motivation and buy-in. And so then you need the motivation of like, let me show you how a top producer is more efficient using what I have set up for you to use. So absolutely.
That is actually a good note. And I like that flip side, because for anyone who's listening where it is a little bit more of a centralized approach and they can build incentives around it, that is one way. I hear from lenders all the time, I don't know how to drive adoption. That's not what I do, right? Like I manufacture loans, like I don't know, right? But that's a great way to do it if there is an opportunity to build that incentive around introducing that technology. So great actual point to complement the other side of it.
I think one of the things that we hear a lot to Sasha's point is that lenders find themselves caught a bit between team members like their sales force that are out there originating leads, finding these loans, keeping referral sources happy, and the GSEs who dictate both technology, approvals, data quality, data standards. So if you think about kind of that context of torn between the primary market and your investors, what are some of the ways you've addressed challenges or you've got lessons learned kind of dealing in between the lending community you serve and Fannie and Freddie who ultimately consume, the data that you verify?
Yeah, great question. And there's some like obvious, not obvious, like they're obvious in, I guess, in principle, they're pretty complex to execute in practice, which are like the day one certainty and the AIM programs, and just going through and kind of removing it from a decision, right? You're going to get data from the source, and also the GSEs are going to give you rep and warrant relief on it. And so you kind of like remove that obstacle. And across our platform, and one of the things that's able to reduce our costs so low is we actually publish this monthly on our website. You can go to the performance report section of our website. You can see our completion rate and see how many of those completions were GSE eligible. And, it's roughly half are GSE eligible. And so it still means half of it isn't. And so I think you're trying to do both at the same time. I think to your question around keeping your sales team happy, I think that comes back to, Sasha, kind of the answer that you were saying earlier. It's trying to not view them as like necessarily diametrically opposed. It's trying to like acknowledge that, look, at the end of the day, the lifeblood of your business is, driving unit volume. And so finding ways to have everyone swim in the same direction to drive unit volume, and just saying like the expectation that we're going to have is that if we're buying a tool that is helping us get more efficient in a very like measurable and tangible way, and therefore I'm going to expect you to use it because I guarantee you it's going to get you more efficient. And that's where really like we're forced to like ferret out these places where we hope a technology can accomplish an outcome, but we're not putting pressure on it to actually go and accomplish that outcome.
Yeah, one of the things that we like to talk about as we think of like now next and this like difficult path lenders have to strike with their product roadmap in the midst of a rate environment, in the midst of just constant change, is executing today while you plan ahead. So you had mentioned earlier that you've spent a lot of your time and resources on capabilities in the platform, features in the platform, making sure that it meets those expectations. Can you talk a little bit about where you are today versus what, our audience should be thinking about in VOIE land about what's next, or sort of as you start to build out from today? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just, the fact that the 75% completion rate helps us reduce cost by 50%. The big thing that we focus on is, increasing that completion rate. If we increase that completion rate, it results in more automation, cost comes down. So the things that we're looking at are some of the other like ways to verify. Today we have, Instant, which is our, payroll partnership based, look it up with a social security number, similar to what most folks are used to using. There's Credentials, which is our consumer permission offering. There's Smart Outreach, which is our replacement for a manual or research verification. And then there's document-based workflows. So we already have 4 ways to verify today, and that's how we get to 75%. In terms of increasing that completion rate, we're looking at 2 ways to verify primarily. One is to use bank data, and that would be as part of like the single source validation type program. So adding that as a way to verify to increase completion rate to lower costs through greater automation. And then also looking at tax-based ways to verify as well for like, self-employed borrowers and business owners and things like that. So by continuing to increase the completion rate, the total cost of ownership comes down because you're removing more labor with increased automation. You're, minimizing data costs all along the way. And then there's like some other things that we do to mostly focused around increasing the automation so that when you get a completed report, we're able to automate as much as possible based on that. That would be like, if the GSE has a calculator that you can run the data through, doing that before just like flipping a PDF back to the lender. Again, like getting into the native tools, the loan origination systems, the points of sale, things like that make all this change management stuff easier.
Ethan, you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you went fast through the functionality.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I just want to make sure I get it right. But Credentials is the consumer permission function that you have. And then you mentioned going into potentially in the future bank data. And I'm curious because there's a lot of talk right now in the industry around whether we do move towards more of a consumer permissioned model. And so is that how you're thinking about in, kind of maybe your next or even later phase, pulling the bank data and maybe that Credentials piece that you already have in place together?
Yeah, absolutely. So like that whole experience, whether you're connecting to a payroll account or uploading a document, which are the parts of the experience are live today, that's all happening through like a Truework interface that you're interacting directly with. If it's embedded in like a point of sale, you're interacting with it via an email or a text message. If it's, getting triggered out of a loan origination system or something like that. And I think what we found is like the existence of each incremental tool is really promising, but ends up being really devilishly difficult in the implementation, because now you're talking about adding yet another thing to this process and managing this. And really that's where I think we add a ton of value, is that, okay, if there's a sixth or a seventh way to verify or an eighth way to verify, like that's great. I do not want to go and set up a seventh or an eighth way to verify and have my loan officer assistant have like 6 different buttons that they might have to click to go and get this validation report. So I think the fact that there are more ways to verify is fantastic. It helps us reduce costs. But again, just going back to like the change management and the implementation piece of this, like leveraging those ways to verify through some sort of like orchestration platform is going to be really critical to get the actual business outcome from it.
Yeah, makes sense.
You've talked a little bit about, why lowering costs is at the crux of what we're all doing and what you're doing and how you can prove it. I did, as I was thinking through the way challengers and innovators come into this industry is always tough. And we talked about it a bit, but we didn't talk about the status quo, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sort of like, you could call it the elephant in the room, you could call it Goliath. I was using the David and Goliath mindset as I was preparing for this, but I do want to ask you, like, when you take on an incumbent, you take on incumbent VOIE, you take on incumbent VOE, Work Number, and others, what either lessons that you've learned or pushback you felt, how have you had to manage your business through that experience, and what are some of the takeaways for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, David and Goliath, we use the same analogy internally.
Okay, great.
Although, like, it's kind of like at some point, everyone, I guess, hopes they become Goliath. So,
True. It's a little bit of a different end game. Yeah.
Here, right? We're all kind of capitalists at the end of the day, but a little tongue in cheek. So, I think what we talk about, the status quo, like to get your 80% commonality, is like we talk about basically Equifax plus collecting some pay stubs plus having a team that picks up the phone and calls your employer for like your 10-day verbal. That's like pretty much status quo today. And that's what so when we talk about, competing within the market, we talk about replacing that whole thing with Truework. And so like, to the extent people are using a vendor, Equifax, as part of that whole thing, we are talking about like, stop using Equifax, use Truework. When you look at people's total cost, a huge percentage of it is for, paying for, data that they don't end up using from a vendor like Equifax. The typical place where we run into problems there is just back on this, overcoming the inertia, Sasha, some of the things that you were saying about being, resistant or to change. And I'm sympathetic to it. We're like, you got to validate income to originate the loan. And so all of a sudden we're going to come in hot and tell you, the way you've been doing that for 30 years, why don't you do it this other way too? This other way. And by the way, if we screw up, you're like, your whole production pipeline is going to be gunked up, and that'll be a huge problem for you. So like, I'm super sympathetic that and really it's our job. Our job is whether we are, in conversation one you're taking the first sales discovery call, or conversation 1,000, and your loan officer is reaching out to someone in our support team to get help with a specific request. Our job is to create trust in each and every one of these interactions that ultimately supports what you are trying to do, which is put more customers in homes. And so I think about how we can continue to create trust in each and every interaction we have with customers, because at the end of the day, we're asking them to do something super important and super impactful, because there's such a meaningful outcome they can achieve on the other side of it. But that outcome is not achievable if they can't trust us, and we can't earn that trust over the course of our relationship with them.
Did Jeremy freeze?
I don't know, or it's such a good answer.
Or he's like so pensive about this conversation. He needed a minute to like digest it all.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Thank you. I think one of the things that I keep coming back to, though, is this this need for a strategy that a lender has to say, and I just put it in the notes for everybody listening at home, setting a goal of 80% adoption and ongoing trust with your tech company, your vendors, is long-term success in my book.
Well, I think you're freezing again on us, but I would double down on that and add to, we're in a time that we've never seen before, right, in this market, that is not just like a time of how do we reduce costs, because we've seen closing costs go up exponentially over the last few years. And I won't call out any names, but we know certain vendors that have hiked prices significantly multiple times, right? And then you're also in this mode of we're really seeing the industry and regulators double down on access to and affordability and the generational wealth gap. And how do we not only reduce costs, be more hopefully profitable with loans, but also get people in homes and keep them in homes. And so anything that we can do to provide that as a piece of that strategy, it's not just about that 80% adoption and, making sure that we get the change management in place. It's how are we helping people achieve the American dream? And, a lot of these fees get passed to the borrower, and ultimately, they have to pay for it one way or the other, whether it's outright or through a program that they get access to, or financing it within the loan or whatever it might be. But, there are ways for us to do all of it, I believe, I hope, where we can all benefit, and still, like I said, help people achieve that American dream. And I think that's got to be part of your strategy too.
Yeah.
Ethan, we have about 2 or 3 more minutes here, and I think that's enough for maybe one more question. One of the things that comes up a lot in our conversations is how many vendors it takes and how even technology companies have to interact with each other in addition to the lender. I was wondering if you have any lessons learned, or if you could talk to our tech company viewers who are listening and trying to understand how best to work with other tech companies like yours, as well as these big platforms like LOS systems and others that need to also be in the mix. And we know they add cost to Sasha's point. So do you have any lessons or takeaways for that group listening?
Yes, I mean, I don't know if they're lessons. I'll tell you about like what we've done and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and then people can take it for whatever they think that's worth, just from our own experience. But I'm always careful about giving advice because I don't know shit. So I think what we found is like they take time to nurture. So knowing like your customer base, knowing what tools are going to be most critical to your customer base to drive the outcome that you were trying to drive for them, and then kind of putting your blinders on and just saying, okay, I know for this set of customers, Encompass is going to be super important. So I need to go and establish a relationship with Encompass, and finding, that 1 or 2 customers who want your product available in Encompass, and using like kind of customer referrals to drive traction into the partner has been something that's super effective. But still, by and large, the way that we get like the first kind of transaction flowing through a new partner system today is just to find a mutual customer. But there is an element too of just being patient with it and recognizing that it's not gonna all happen overnight. But I think if you can get in the mindset of viewing that as both like a blessing and not just a curse, this is like a barrier to entry that you are overcoming with the product that you are creating, and you are going through it. That also means whoever comes in 2 to 3 years and tries to copy your product because you've been super successful is also going to have to go into the same thing. And so at least you bought yourself a 2 to 3 year head start in terms of like your partner ecosystem relative to kind of any kind of competition that might come into market after you.
We've talked about this before on other calls, Ethan, but I've created like a almost call to action to lenders to push for what you want and what you need that's best for you from a corporate standpoint and for your borrowers as well. Because, bottom line is, and I've worked in mostly mortgage tech in my career in housing, so, I have strong opinions to this end. But whether you're bootstrapping it, funded by VC, PE, whatever it might be, like tech companies have to make money. They just do, like everyone else. And so their motivations are always going to be somewhat skewed. And often, the ones that are bigger, that have more sway, don't want to let the smaller ones come into play in a way that would be actually more beneficial to the lender and borrower. And so this is where I say, like, without any other push from any other body or entity, I'll be polite and careful with my words. I feel like lenders are the one that can say, hey, so and so, I need you to work with this other vendor. This is a critical piece of the puzzle. This matters to us. We'll keep working with you. You're going to win. Our borrowers are going to win, and need you to understand why this is a critical component of what we do. I often find lenders don't feel as strong about their ability to push on vendors as they really do have the ability to. And so I hope they continue to, because there are a lot of conglomerates out there that carry a lot of heavy weight and move that weight around heavily. So it would be nice to see them continue to promote for what's best for them and what's best for the borrower, which means we, as tech companies, we just have to work better together.
Yep, absolutely. Sasha,
Ethan,
I think like 3 different times on this call, you gave an answer much more eloquently and convincingly.
Oh, no. No.
Well, that's why we do this, Ethan. This is great.
Right on.
This conversation is hopefully really helpful, and I'm glad that you were able to join us. So thanks again for being here and taking the time to sponsor Now Next Later and join us. And thank you to the Truework team. We'll definitely be in touch, and we'll see your team and you very soon.
Yeah, super fun. Thanks, y'all. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks again.
Take care.